J.P. Morgan was a very powerful man who lived over 100 years ago. He was taught how to talk, think, and act like a banker by his father when he was young. He ended up becoming a very powerful banker around the turn of the century. Many powerful men around the turn of the century were titled captains of industry, but with that power, some gave into cheating and corruption and became robber barons. It has been debated whether or not J.P. Morgan was a captain of industry or a robber baron, but through my research, I believe that he was an honest and true captain of industry. First, I will discuss how he should not be considered a robber baron. Then I will talk about what qualifies him to be a captain of industry. And finally, I will talk about the benefit to society he was to remove all doubt of him ever being a robber baron. First, I will explain what a robber baron is. According to dictionary.com, a robber baron is a ruthlessly powerful U.S. capitalist or industrialist of the late 19th century, considered to have become wealthy by exploiting natural resources, corrupting legislators, or other unethical means. I will break this down into the three basic parts. Did he exploit natural resources? Did he corrupt legislators? And did he use any unethical means to become wealthy? J.P. Morgan never exploited natural resources. The most Morgan ever was involved with natural resources was in 1901 when he formed the United States Steel, but there was no exploiting done when he paid Carnegie $48 million for it, which is about $5.5 billion today. The next question is whether or not he corrupted legislators. Morgan was involved in some political matters, but it does not seem that he had anything to do with corruption. In the 1875 election, Morgan wanted his company and its partners to donate $5,000 to the Rutherford B. Hayes campaign. He said that defeat means inflation. He did not mean to corrupt or gain an influence on Rutherford B. Hayes, he just did not want to increase inflation. Another time when he was involved with government was when he financed federal bonds worth $1,400 million to refinance the Civil War debt. When he did this, he controlled the financial stability of the nation. The Assistant Treasurer Secretary William Curtis said that U.S. finances are being controlled by a committee of which J.P. Morgan is the chairman, while the Secretary of Treasury sits practically powerless in his office. The final reason for someone to be considered a robber baron is if they use unethical means to become rich. But he was taught good values from his father and never was involved in anything unethical. Now I go over why he is a captain of industry. He created a very successful company in 1871 when he went into business with Anthony Drexel and opened Drexel, Morgan & Company. After a year, the company moved to Wall Street. They bought the most expensive piece of land at the time for $1 million. Another reason he is a captain of industry is because of all the power he had. Since Morgan had merged many companies together, he had a lot of influence on Wall Street. And because many businesses depend on Wall Street, they in a way were dependent on Morgan. With Morgan in control, the bankers have a lot of control over what happened financially. Bankers set the stock values of companies, entering the stock market too. In the end, if a company wasn't approved by Morgan, they were not going to make it. By 1900, he controlled 1/6 of the nation's railroad industry. He was also in control of 70% of the steel industry, 1/5 of all the corporations on the New York Stock Exchange, the 3 largest insurance companies, and several banks. One woman said he was the king, he was it. She did not say he was like a dictator, but said that he was good, just like a king. He is also a captain of industry because his effect on America can still be seen 100 years after his death. The way of doing business by creating corporations is still commonly used. J.P. Morgan & Chase is the country's largest bank. He created monopolies on individual businesses by merging them together. He changed America from a bunch of competing businesses to gigantic corporations. The way he was a pioneer into new technologies also makes him a captain of industry. In the late 1870s, Morgan began to invest in Thomas Edison's experiments. He was so impressed by them that he kept on investing even though his father told him not to. In 1889, Morgan combined 7 electrical businesses, including Edison's, into the Edison General Electric Company. In 1892, he then merged the Edison General Electric Company with a competing company to create the General Electric Trust. This became the largest electric company in the world. J.P. Morgan was the definition of a captain of industry, while he did not match the description of a robber baron. But one of the greatest reasons of why he is not a robber baron is that he is a great benefit to society. He used his wealth to benefit the New York community where he lived. He wanted New York to become a modern city, and he led the way by making his house the first in New York to be completely lighted by electricity. He saw electrical lighting in his house, a way to exhibit to the world that New York is well off both visually and technologically. He also helped the country out several times in financial disasters. In the Depression of 1893, he thought the best way to get the country out of the Depression was by joining competing businesses into large corporations that he would be able to control. He was again a key part in solving financial disaster in 1907. He was able to raise $25 million in 15 minutes to keep the stock market from closing early. Morgan bought lots of art and donated much of it to New York City. He wanted New York to have a better historical base. He helped organize the Metropolitan Museum of Art and the Museum of Natural History. He eventually became the president of the Metropolitan Museum of Art too. He donated millions of dollars for new buildings in the lying-in hospital after a friend showed him the need. He once went out of his way to create a job for an elderly lady who still wanted to feel like she was earning a living. And according to the Fordham University article, in 1877, when Congress wasn't able to pay for the Army, Morgan offered to, as he put it, protect a class of men whose interests should, in our judgment, command the greatest and most earnest solicitude of the government and the country. He ended up paying the War Department over $500,000 a month to finance the Army. His desire to better the city of New York, his ability to solve financial disasters, and his willingness to give out large amount of money shows that he was not a robber baron. In conclusion, Morgan should not be thought of as a robber baron. He goes against the definition of what makes someone a robber baron. He was a true captain of industry because of his power, his effect on America Day, and his willingness to invest in new technologies. The way he was able to benefit New York society, as well as the country's, shows that he was definitely not a robber baron.